Welcome back, guys. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Yellow Tape. This is episode 2. If you haven't thus far, you can go back on the page and check out episode 0 and episode 1. Why not? So, I guess let's get right into it. First and foremost, I want to talk to you guys about low card exchange principle, which pretty much states that every contact leaves a trace, whether it be DNA, hair, fiber, or fingerprint. And when it comes to fingerprint, that's probably the most famous terminology in terms of forensic science. When people hear forensics, they usually think fingerprints. Nowadays, they probably think DNA, but in terms of popularity, they're probably interchangeable. So, with that being said, what are fingerprints? If you look down at your hand, you notice your whole palm of your hand is a friction-ridged skin. Under that skin are sweat glands. If you touch a surface, you might leave a pattern of that friction-ridged skin, whether it's the whole handprint or just a whole fingerprint or a partial print, which are extremely common. And we are humans, so we tend to touch our face and touch our hair. I'll be patting my weave 24/7, so that's normal. So it's very easy to leave very oily prints sometimes. So when it comes to types of prints, we have different categories. We have arches, loops, and whorls. So what is an arch? Let me start with an easy one. What is a loop? Here's my tool. My scientific ninja tool. So a loop is pretty much when one ridge, when I say the ends, I mean left to right of the finger, coming from one end of the finger, and they form a loop and then leave out the same side that they came in from. If you could imagine that like a cul-de-sac, how there's one way in, one way out, but obviously it's not that perfectly circular, not that neat, also not that suburban. I guess in terms of percentage of fingerprints we see, that'll be about 60 to 65%. And then you have your whorls. In terms of percent we see, that'll be about 30 to 35%. And for lack of a better term, whorls are just spirals in the middle of your finger. Yes. Fingertip, sure. And in your whorls, you commonly see deltas, like these little triangles. Shout out to Hove. You see deltas on each side of the whorl. That's very common. And what I should have mentioned about the loops, on the curve of that loop, you will very commonly see delta on that part as well. So that's definitely very common. And then last, which is about 5 to 10% of the fingerprints we see, are arches. And arches pretty much just come in from one side of the finger, take a small indentation up a little bit, however much, varying degrees, and then just leave again at the other end of the print. And again, that's about 5 to 10% of what we see. So what are the types of fingerprints you're likely to see, types of prints you're likely to see at a crime scene? Well, you have your patent prints, which are your visible prints, very easy to photograph. When a person at a crime scene may have had their hand in some blood, ink, grease, paint, and then they put their hand somewhere else, it leaves that mark of the pattern on their finger, so it'll be very visible, or more visible than something like a plastic or a latent print. What is a plastic print? A plastic print is a impression print left in something like gum. For example, if someone is chewing gum, he or she, because women commit crimes too, takes the gum out their mouth and put it somewhere, you can see a print on that gum, or something like Play-Doh or silly putty. Yeah, so those are very good for patent prints. And then you have your latent prints, which are not visible to the eye. To see those prints, you would have to develop them, and you can develop them chemically or physically. So chemically, you can use ninhydrin spraying or super glue fuming, and physically, you can do it by magnetic powder. So I guess I'll get into one of those. So magnetic powder, if you wanted to lift the print or develop a print that way, you would lightly, well, first let me explain how it looks. It's a rod that comes with magnetic powder, and that rod, you might think it usually be like a, maybe like a paintbrush kind of, setup, but it's not. It's just a rod. It's magnetic. In that case, the magnetic powder is the brush, which actually is a very advantageous thing, because when it comes to regular powder often gets stuck in between the minutia of the fingerprint. Is a lot of excess sometimes. So now with that magnetic powder, you can lift that up outside of those, in between spaces of the fingerprint, and clean up the print a lot. So when it comes to magnetic powder versus regular powder, that's 100% a plus. So where do these fingerprints go? They go to databases. So main databases we have are IAFIS, which is the Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System, which is ran by the FBI on your federal level. You also have automated fingerprint identification systems, which are ran state by state, on a state-by-state basis. Which, and all these AFIS fingerprints are in IAFIS, so that's the one that we're using throughout all the states when you have more of your federal crimes. And I seen this thing. Well, not I seen this thing, but I know a lot of shows like to show that people run the fingerprint through the system and it takes 10 minutes. No, according to the FBI, 96% of the electronic criminal submissions are completed in under 2 hours, which means it takes some time. Now, if you look at AFIS on a state level, it might take less time, but for the federal level, things take, that's almost 2 hours just to run a print. On top of that, these things are like Google. You type something in or you put a print in, and you might get 10 possible matches. So after you get that, after you get those possible matches, then you send that print to a fingerprint specialist, in which he will match minutia. And by minutia, I mean things like bifurcations, islands, lines, ridge endings. And these are the things that these specialists use to specify, or some better word for it, clarify prints from one another. And they are trying to match these points to one another, but a big thing they are trying to do is trying to use a process of elimination. So if you see that, well, first of all, when you're matching prints, you have to make sure that the general pattern is the same. So if you have a whirl, it has to be the same kind of whirl. What I didn't mention earlier that are the subcategories of those classes. When it comes to loops, you have left-right loops. When it comes to arches, you have plain tinted arches. When it comes to whirls, you have like 4 or 5 subdivisions, pocketed, central loop, central whirl, sorry. So first you have to make sure that those general patterns are the same. And then you can check for your minutia. But what they're really doing is process of elimination. Does this bifurcation also appear on this print as well? If it doesn't, then it's easy to say, okay, that's not it. So that's what they do. A lot of people argue whether these how many minutia you need to count for it to be called a match, or better yet, to say that these two prints came from common origin. That's a better term, real forensically astute term. Common origin. We don't really say things are matches too often. Hey, so I believe the minimum is 12 minutia matching in some jurisdictions or some places, some labs. I know that you can go up to 20 minutia matching, so it depends where you're at, where you want to say how many of these bifurcations and ridge endings and islands are matching to say that these came from common origins. And a lot of times you see a lot of problems with our fingerprints admissible, because sometimes we often get a lot of partial prints, but if we can prove that, that's where maybe the number of matching minutia might make a come into play a lot. If you have a partial print versus a whole print, but they still have 12 matching minutia, that's where things might get sticky. A lot of people don't like to use fingerprints in a court of law. They don't think it's admissible, but they'd rather use something like hearsay, word of mouth, which is clearly susceptible to lies. But we don't have to get into that today. And I think I'll just stop right there. I don't want to bore you guys. So, you know the deal, guys. If you like what you heard, you like what you saw, you know the vibe, like and subscribe. If you have any comments to leave for me, comment, anything helpful, let me know. If you guys have any questions, you can leave them at jforensics2020@gmail.com. That's the letter J, the number 4, ENSICS.com, 2020@gmail.com. And that's about it. I'm Julian. Got DJ Ziggy on the ones and twos.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that's about it. See you guys next time. Peace.